if this thing gets made, what I'm reading, then it did get to Broadway. But he's including it that it didn't get there, or we know it didn't get there, or something. You know what I mean? So it didn't get there.
Yeah.
But he's saying it did get there, and we're watching. I'm reading the script that's going to be filmed. So Francesco says, how can this be? A theatrical work by an Italian composer, even more obscure than myself. He's not even in the dictionary. The lucky bastard. Remember, Francesco doesn't want any academics up his ass. Obviously, one of the Sicilians. Chimp, we are indeed fortunate. Let's go in and enjoy ourselves. He's a Zappa. You probably have lots of nice, happy little Dago-sounding string trios all over the place. Chimp says, I can't stand happy little Dago-sounding string trios. I like only clarinets, tambourines, accordions, and guilt. Now, remember me reading this? I read this, remember? Francesco, study the show poster. You do?
No, I don't.
Okay. This person, so they're looking at the poster with Ike Willis dressed as a mammy nun. This person has a head like a potato, lips like a duck, and is dressed in some perverse form of medieval religious costuming. There's nothing cheerful about it, says Francesco. It's actually very ugly. It is obvious that these Sicilians take a different approach to things. Shemp, we must see this potato creature. Shemp, I'm rubbing it. I'm going back. I'm changing my name. I'm going to become a Christian. I'm going to become a Republican. Onions. Onions are better, always better. He walks away, rubbing the pot, leaving Francesco alone in front of the theater. Don't you remember that? Remember we were talking about Shemp goes back. He gives up.
Yes.
Leaving Francesco alone. Maybe you dropped off, Roxy, but I don't think we would have done it without you there. But now here comes the important part, maybe one of the most important parts of the whole play. So Francesco's standing there alone, looking at the poster. He wants to go in and watch it. As Shemp walks off and goes back to 1770, Francesco says, "Big deal, ma vaffanculo the onion." I don't know what ma vaffanculo. You know what that is, Roxy? Ma vaffanculo? That means fuck the onion?
It's like an expression to say fuck the onion.
Right. What do you know from excitement? Exactly nothing. Like, you know, Bert, you remember this, right? You remember me reading this.
Yes.
And this is probably the end, what I actually finished reading, because I didn't go into the Frank part. Or did I? No, I don't think I did.
No, we didn't go into the Frank part.
What do you know from excitement? Exactly nothing, he says to Shemp. Now, look at this. A robot Frank Zappa is imagined by the editor of a famous rock and roll magazine, maybe that would be Jan Wenner of Rolling Stone, emerges from the Thingfish Theater and rolls over to Francesco. Did I do that? Is this new?
I don't remember a robot Zappa.
No,
okay, good.
This is new.
Okay, yeah. So what happens? We have Frank as Moon's dad and no identification of himself as Frank Zappa. He's just a synonymous Moon's dad. This is the first time, unless there was something way back at the beginning, but I think it is the first time for Frank the robot. So here's Francesco by himself, and Frank comes out and introduces himself. And he's a robot, Frank Zappa, because some editor of a rock and roll magazine thinks Frank is a robot. So he emerges from the Thingfish Theater and rolls over to Francesco. Frank says, "I'm pleased to see you're so punctual, Francesco." Francesco says, "You know my name?" Frank, "Yes, but not much more. I made up the rest." He made up the rest about Francesco. Francesco goes, what do you mean? What have you made up? So Frank's talking to his fictional creation who thinks it's real. Francesco thinks he's real. And we decided that Francesco was real, and he's actually Frank, right? 300 and 400 years old. So we're even getting more crazier than Robot Frank is. But let's try to stick to the script here. So Francesco says, "Are you the little devil that stuck me in this fucking dictionary? Exposing my bunghole for all Are you the little devil that stuck me in this fucking dictionary, exposing my bunghole for all eternity to the ravages of academia?" Frank says, "Most certainly not." See, because this is not Moon's dad, right? This is not the guy writing it. Moon's dad is writing it. right? That category, Moon's dead. This is Frank the robot, and he didn't do it. He says, you may be assured that I have no connection whatsoever to the infernal machinery of the American education industry. I am Frank Zappa as imagined by the editor of a famous rock and roll magazine. I am an anachronism who makes the ugliest music on the planet. I have no right to call myself a member of the human race. I am tasteless, untalented, pompous, arrogant, cruel, insensitive, vulgar, and not a fun guy because I don't use drugs. Francesca goes, Minchia. You know what Minchia means? M-I-N-C-H-C-H-I-A?
No.
You don't know. It's a statement of shock or something. He doesn't understand what's going on. So then Frank the robot says, you never fucked a Duke.
I think he's just playing with words that sound Italian. But,
Okay. Minchia. Then Frank the robot says, you never fucked the Duke of York's girlfriend. That's back at the beginning of this whole Demarest book when he's making fun of the Duke of York and screwing the wife of the Duke of York. You never fucked the Duke of York's girlfriend.
Lady Aurora.
What?
He was fucking Lady Aurora. I remember because my mother.
You remember?
Name is Aurora.
Your own mother? Holy shit!
Yes.
This is Xenocracy here. Wow. You remember the name, which is, a week ago, because it's your mother's name. Holy shit. You never fucked the Duke of York's girlfriend. He would have had, now look, you got the name Mother, Aurora, your mother. You never imagined all your life you'd be in a fucking radio show reading the transcript of something written 30 years ago, and it would have your mother's name. Now that's pretty unpredicted. So you never fucked a Duke.
My mother fucked by Francesco Zappa.
You got to tell her that. You fucked Francesco Zappa. What's he? Oh, he's real, but he's sort of fake. But we're not sure. But he's been around a long time. He might be Frank. So you never fucked the Duke of York's girlfriend, says Frank to Francesco.
Maybe
he would have had
my real father.
Yes, Francesco's your real father. All right, I'll let you. I didn't say that, Mr. Flores. I didn't say that. Your own daughter said it, not me. Okay, back off. I didn't do it. You never fucked the Duke of York's girlfriend. He would have had you horsewhipped. You never met a kosher alchemist. That's Shem. You only wrote happy little Dago-sounding string trios and had a dull, boring life, playing the cello and kissing ass to Baroque period ticket buyers. Francesco says, I don't seem to remember it that way at all. Are you sure? For centuries, I've been convinced that I was imagining myself, says Francesco. Frank says, no, it is your great misfortune to have me doing it for you. So Frank is imagining all this stuff. So now he's got Francesco, his own creation, thinks he actually existed. Is this getting into future virtual reality confusions? So Francesco goes, why is it misfortune, Frank, for you to have me? Frank says, you're a great misfortune to have me, the robot, doing it for you. Why a misfortune? In spite of your metallic complexion, you do appear to be some sort of a Zappa. You don't look much like a whoremonger, but I'll bet there's a happy little Dago-sounding string trio stuffed away in there someplace. Frank says, all things are possible through concentrated technological ignorance. Very interesting phrase, concentrated technological ignorance. So people are ignorant of technology because they're concentrated, and that makes all things possible? All things are possible through concentrated technological ignorance. Your assignment, you two, this week is to figure out what that means. What is concentrated technological ignorance, and why does that make all things possible?
Because I think it's quite interesting that we're trying to get to the real explanation of physics and what's going on, and yeah, we have this concentrated technological or scientific ignorance, and we are starting to see the mystery landscape, like the fact that there are many of us, and here is Zappa confronting Francesco and the writer
and other selves.
Yes.
He's confronting many selves. So all things are possible through concentrated technological ignorance. That means people don't know what they're doing. Scientists don't know what they're doing, and that's good because they stumble into discoveries. If you knew a lot, you wouldn't make anything. So wealth or new technologies come out of ignorance. And it's concentrated technological ignorance now because they got whole teams working on things. And therefore, all things are possible. So Francesco says, you're not a very cheerful person.
All our science is a fallacy, and our technology is based on this fake science. So it's like a concentrated technological ignorance that somehow works.
Yes, that somehow works. Francesco says, you're not a very cheerful person, are you? Frank says, I'm not a person at all. My disposition was manufactured for me in an office in Northern California. That would be where the Rolling Stone magazine was before it went to New York. Francesco, surely that in itself is not a sufficient excuse for an outlook as hostile as the one you exhibit. I'm beginning to resent being related to you. Frank says, this is America, 1984. There will be no problem providing you with an entire phone book full of corruptible scholars, eager to alter the appropriate textbooks for a guarantee of tenure and a gift certificate from Tweeds R Us. Did you get all that? There will be no problem providing you with an entire phone book full of corruptible scholars, eager to alter the appropriate textbooks for a guarantee of tenure and a gift certificate from Tweeds R Us. I guess professors wear tweeds. Francesco, why the fuck would somebody bother to invent something as wretched as you? My God, you're a hateful creature. I'm such a terrific guy. How could you have invented me? So Francesco can't understand why this rotten Frank is even connected to him. Then Frank says, I am pure fiction. I am the product of the imaginations of legions of tiny, hateful people. May they burn forever in God's perfect hell, or move to Encino. There's Frank insulting everybody. But it's robot Frank. Then Francesco goes, at all that, goes, what? Let's go back and read what he went. What? I am pure fiction. I am the product of the imaginations of legions of tiny, hateful people. May they burn forever in God's perfect hell, or move to Encino. Francesco goes, what? Frank says, never mind. So now that you've finally arrived, I have big plans for you. Francesco says, you presume a great deal. Why should I choose to involve myself in these disgusting plans of yours? Frank says, because just as you suspect the presence of a cleverly concealed happy little Dago-sounding string trio somewhere in me, I suspect the presence of a potentially deranged musical mentality lurking somewhere in you. It is my duty to unleash this horrible force, send you back where you came from, and allow you to pollute the musical atmosphere of that wretchedly wimpish period into which you were born. So Frank wants to send back this mutant to fuck up Mozart and Beethoven and the Platonic Larouchian tradition. What do you think of that? It's all familiar to me. I did read this on my own before, but you guys, this is new to you, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so when Francesco hears that, he goes, this is truly perverse. What you are suggesting simply reeks of obscurity. Congratulations. What a fiendishly original idea. So Francesco likes the fact he's going to go back and be an idiot. It means that he will become more obscure. Then Frank says,
yes,
Frank
I think he's also making fun of, for example, Adorno talking about this awful popular art and the culture and this. So, and he's saying, yes, I am the worst. I don't deserve to be part of the human race.
That's a good point. This is him responding to the elite, Adorno. Yes, he's telling Adorno, yes, you think I'm a creep because I engage pop culture. That's what you're saying, right? Yes. Frank, that's pretty good. And then, so Francesco loves this because it means he's going to become more obscure. Then Frank says, Frank Zappa, as imagined by the editor of a famous rock and roll magazine, has never had any original ideas. That's what Ian said about me. Since what he does is trivial and irrelevant to the American way of life, their absence pleases everyone. Absence of his original ideas. Francesco says, well, somebody had to dream this thing up. Are you trying to tell me there's another one hiding out someplace? Now, this is pretty ionic. You've got Frank doing an ionic scenario of sending someone back to screw up whatever.
Yes, and he's playing with the... the two cartoons of himself, like one will be the high culture Francesco Zappa engaging the Baroque and all these traditions.
Yeah.
And the other is the popular culture Frank that doesn't deserve to be
Frank.
part of the race. And he's making fun of
deserve to be part of the high culture
archetypes that they say what he's doing is not worth. Yeah, and but he's somehow trying to educate the audience with this
right. So
ionic scenario.
Right. So you're saying the classical culture thinks Frank's an idiot for going into the pop culture, and the pop culture Frank is not allowed into the classical culture, and the pop culture audience would think Frank is.
To Zappa's, the Francesco Zappa is like the tradition, Baroque, classic music.
Yeah, yeah.
And the rock artist Zappa.
Yes. So Francesco says, well, somebody had to dream this thing up. Are you trying to tell me there's another one hiding out someplace, another Frank, or another Francesco? And there is. That's the one who's home talking to Moon. Frank says, of course, you fool. It would be, this is, yes. So he's tired. Francesco figures out there might be another Zappa, and he's right. Frank says, of course, you fool. It would be very amusing for you to meet him. Yeah. It'd be very amusing for Francesco to meet Moon's dad. Remember, that's the guy described as Moon's dad. Everyone tells me he's a sick motherfucker who hates everything except sex and music, but he never leaves his laboratory. That's the way Moon's dad was. Those are facts. Francesco says, hey, now he sounds like an okay guy. Let's go. And Frank the robot says, I said it might be amusing for you to meet him. I did not say it was possible for you to meet him. Francesco says, what's the problem? We just grab a bottle of wine and drop in on him. Frank says, you are speaking of a person who is so obscure as to require an improved definition of the clinical terminology. No one ever sees him. Most are convinced he cannot possibly exist. So Frank's saying the real Frank Zappa it's pretty hard to find him. And then Francesco...
But it's also very interesting that he always called his studio the kitchen or the laboratory. So he's
the secret.
He's not only an artist; he's really a scientist, artist.
Yes.
He's modern.
Inventing.
A comedian.
Right.
And a jock.
Yes,
he's a artist, scientist, comedian, and a jock. Francesco says... Para Zappa.
No, the barrel. He's the barrel.
Oh, he's viral. Oh, the barrel. The barrel. Yes, the barrel. The barrel. So Frank the robot says most are convinced Look at this. Frank says most are convinced that Moon's dad cannot possibly exist. Francesco says he does, doesn't he? Frank says, I have been invented by legions of tiny, hateful people. I know only what they know. So Robot Frank isn't sure if he knows the other Frank. I have been invented by legions of tiny, hateful people. I know only what they know. That's to Francesco's question. He does exist, doesn't he? Uh-oh, and I think that's the end of that. We go into a thingfish scenario. So, that's the complex Frank reality. What do you think of that, man?
Ion is always questioning, what do you know? Like, you have to ask because actually we don't know anything. And that's the thing with science and art. The postmodernist thought art cannot have a meaning because it depends on who's watching the work of art and the different periods and your perception changes with medias and all this, and you cannot say this means this or we know this forever. It's always changing, and like he says, I only know what they know. It's like or knowing
what they know.
Collective.
The robot only knows what they know because he's programmed.
Yes, and everything that is on the Android meme that retrieves the content of all past media is what they know. It's all a collective knowing.
Right.
We know what all the others know, but we don't have original knowing. No idea.
Listen to her, Bert. She's talking herself into a rabbit hole. The mind, the Mexican mind, trying to figure out what time it is. By the way, we don't know. Maybe 20 minutes ago, Sky Goddess Sue said, "Arrivederci, payday forcelings. Got to walk the streets of Rome." So what that would be? It's 2:20 there, right? 2:20 in the afternoon, Roxy, correct? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got the right time. And she's got the same time as you, so she's going out in the afternoon. Okay, now here's one more ionic part. We're now coming to Thingfish. So we've had all these previous plays and scripts and scenarios, many things like Gregory Peccary, Billy the Mountain, Hunch and Toot, early Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt People, Hertzberg and Buddy doing P&E conversion, all this stuff. And we finally come to Thingfish. We've done 259 pages out of a 350. So there's 40, there's about 90 pages left.
It's interesting because McLuhan always compare humans with the fish in the water that doesn't know what water is or what's going on in this environment.
Okay, so here, I'm not going to read all the script, but I'm going to give you the important points. So it ends with Frank saying, "I have been invented by legions of tiny, hateful people. I know only what they know." Then we know Moon's dad writes this. What I'm going to read next is written by Moon's dad. The Thingfish exterior flies out, revealing the theater interior and the set for the opening. A small cabaret stage with its own curtain and footlights. Seated around it are a group of conservatively dressed first-nighters, fondling their playbills. The back curtain is limbo black. Harry, the guy with the word processor, now in a tux, and his wife Rhonda, in a stylish suit with a fox collar, enter right and make their way toward two of the three empty seats in the front of the cabaret stage. So they're showing a play within a play. I think that's what's happening here. Francesco takes a seat opposite them. Frank rolls in. That's the robot. The robot's in a wheelchair. In some kind of chair, right? Yeah, he's rolling around. Frank rolls in unnoticed by the little audience and positions himself behind Francesco. The stage lights dim as if the show were beginning. We hear the Thingfish music blast out from a pre-recorded digital tape. The cabaret curtain rises. Seated on the stage, we see Thingfish himself lecturing to a tiny potato-headed dummy named Sister Abdullah X. On either side of the cabaret stage, the characters and events described in Thingfish narration appear, miming a reenactment of the text. We see the evil prince, who looks suspiciously like a Christian Republican version of Shemp. So Shemp never made it back to 1770. He turns into the evil prince. Maybe. We see a group of country western musicians who bear strong resemblance to the rentable Dutch midgets. We see the prison warden, Shirley Stoller, and I don't know who that is, and the prison inmates who will eventually become transformed. So basically what happens is the government is trying out an AIDS-like monster virus, and they do it on the Thingfish and his fellow inmates. But they somehow eat something before the virus can take effect, and they don't get affected. And the rest of the world's going to get affected and die, and the mammy nuns stay alive. They got the drops. It protected them from the plague that was coming.
Yeah.
And this is the scenario of the play. Talk about predicting the Ionic. So maybe just to give you I'll just read a bit of it. Okay. So Thingfish says, this is the beginning of the play, so to speak. Once upon a time, must have been around October, a few years back, one of those top-secret laboratories the government keeps stashed away underneath Virginia, an evil prince, occasionally employed as a part-time theatrical criticizer, set to working on a plot to the systematic genocidal removalance of all unwanted, highly rhythmic individuals and sissy boys. The cocksucker done whiffed up a secret potion, and right along with it, the atrocious idea that what he'd been boiling up down there just might be the final solution to the white man's boydin, if you acquire my drift. Now, didn't we already deal with the end of... no, maybe I'm just mixing up with my own reading ahead. Yeah, okay, forget that. So, Thingfish says, well, he, the evil prince, he was sure he had a good thing going, but there was always the possibility that something might fuck up. So he planned to have a little test just to check it out all before he dump it on the water supply. Shortly then after, with high-level government corroboration, he arranged to have a goodwill visit to San Quentin, along with some country western musicians, and sprinkle a little bit of it on some of the boys in there, since they done used a few of them before when they was messing with the syphilis. That's a famous story. Back in the 30s, the government, gave some black prisoners syphilis. You remember that, right? In Tupamanga or someplace. Tuskegee?
Tuskegee, yes.
Yeah. All blacks know that story, right? And they resent white man for that for the last 70 years, right? You guys hate the white guys for what they did to the black prisoners. Killed them off with their whatever they were. I can't remember what they were experimenting with. So here's a replay in San Quentin. So here they come with the potion. Dumping it all in the mashed potatoes. Then they wind up. I'm reading it as it's written. Then they went up to the warden's office for some hot toddy, watching a little football while they was waiting to see what going to happen. Fact of the matter were, nothing happened. So they went off and dribbled it in a special shipment of Galut Colonia that went out boats November. Next thing you know, fagnets be dropping off like flies, along with a large number of severely tanned individuals, presumably of Haitian extractment. Then the dancers representing the convicts used for testing disappear behind the cabaret stage. Thingfish continues, but not the boys in the rest home. Oh, no. Mixing this shit with the mashed potatoes done smooth it out a little, so as it wouldn't kill your ass, but it sure would make you ugly. And if you was already ugly, it'd make your ass mean and ugly. And if you was already mean and ugly, it'd turn you into a strange, unknown creature never before seen on Broadway. That's right. It'd turn you into a mammy nun. So you get turned into a ugly thing, or then a mean. Right. Then you turn into Roxy's mother. A mammy nun is the nuns who started the convent 150 years ago in Mexico. Roxy's great aunt. So yeah, you turn into an unknown creature. All right, that's right. It turned you into a mammy nun. Head like a potato, lips like a duck. Big old hands puffing up. Big ones. Science. Let's see, what's this mean? Lips like the duck, big old hands puffing up. Big hands, he repeats it. Big hands, big ones. And then he goes, science. Yells that out. And then he goes, medieval religious costume all over your body. Yeah, that's the nunnery costumery. Yo, wow. Oh, yeah, Francesco says to the robot Frank, okay, robot Frank is back in. What language is this? Frank says, it is a pseudo-Negrocious dialect, or Negrocious. It's a pseudo-Negrocious dialect originated by an actor named Tim Moore in the... Are you laughing with, you know who Tim Moore is? Does that mean anything?
No, I'm just laughing. No, I'm laughing at the name, Negrocious.
Is this politically incorrect? Could this ever get performed on Broadway? What do you think?
Probably not.
At least maybe some African Americans would like it, but there's always going to be a gang that doesn't like it, and they're growing in numbers, right? So they're dangerous. Yeah. They're not cool. They're like those students. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Are you up on that, Bert?
Yes, I've read some of it.
Yeah, you've seen them go.
It's pretty. I think they had something at a university a couple weeks ago or something. Yes, but
yeah, they invaded a library. You can see it on YouTube. They invaded the library, made a lot of noise. Okay. So what language is this, says Francesco the Robot Frank? It's a pseudo-Negrocious dialect, originated by an actor named Tim Moore in the TV version of Amos and Andy. He was severely punished for it. The NAACP made him pay for his own one-way ticket to Fresno. It is a tradition in America to reward artistry with contempt and ignorance. No, it's a tradition in America to reward artistry with contempt and ignorance with outrageous praise. Americans live in terror of excellence and will do anything to avoid contact with it. Those who attempt it are murdered by prolonged exposure to video radiation. So we know how fantastic Zappa's music is. Bert's learned the past couple of years. It's like, nobody can do it. It's done, and it's awesome, right? But it's an invisible environment. Everybody thinks Frank's an idiot. They don't want to recognize excellence. And if anybody is doing excellence, it's Frank, to the discipline he creates. So he's really being anti-American by being well-trained and disciplined. At least Frank is saying that. So,
well, I think he was reduced in the media to the artist that was using foul language, and many people just knew that about him. They didn't know anything about his whole work. He was just the one that was obscene or something like that.
Yes. Picture with a toilet. Now, Francesco wants obscurity. There's a part of Frank, he always said he didn't want to be remembered. He was just making the music for himself, and he did it till it ended. So he is part of the Francesco that doesn't want to be analyzed by academics. This is what Gail was mad at.
That's what Ian said. You should do things for your own pleasure. Any other type of aspiration is useless. It's not important. Yeah.
You won't even like what they say about you. Just a minute. I'm taking a break, and I'm eating my remake. Time for me to get rebuilt. I've been working here for hours. Was I have my remake? Bob, I'm eating the Galut Colonia, the stuff that saved the mammy nuns.
But that's a good point. What you're doing. This is a good point of what you're doing, Bob, of pointing this out about Zappa, because I am sure that 98% of the people that know Frank Zappa have no idea about this really important, obscure information because he was blackballed, most people know him, he played guitar and he said bad words and sat on the toilet and maybe he ate shit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really important. I mean, because the guy's a genius. I mean, thing that Roxana brought when we opened this up, when she was talking about Bach and Stravinsky, and then we led into Zappa of his classical music training. That's something I treasure, that he was the last really real composer of music.
Yeah.
And he used the electrified music, but then he took it beyond that. But then what we're discovering with this book is that he was he was using like the whole, what you would say, the mythic. I mean, he's using television. He's using the cliches of the time from, in the 70s and 60s. He used everything, the whole landscape of what most people were exposed to in the 60s. And, I mean, it was like cartoon. I mean, it's just it covered everything. That's what blows my mind. And then everything is intertwined together with his album covers, relates to this book. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's great information.
People understand great art is. Great art, a lot of thought and planning and creating effects and subliminal levels. A lot of genius mental energy goes into it. And he's done all that, and he's showing it. And he totally knows what he is. He knows that nobody knows who he is, so at best he's a robot. Now, hey, it just hurt me now. He has to be a robot because everybody is a robot. We learned that in the Cat Beefheart versus Grunt People in '69. Everybody was a robot back then. This is 15 years later. Frank he was replaced because he has a picture of himself in '69. He says, I'd just been killed by the government because I knew too much. So he's including his own replacement. Like he replaced Beefheart and the Grunt People. Who was it? The agent, the government agent.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize this part. Yeah, he's replaced too. And he's hiding out somewheres. He's just like me. He's hiding out. He just moon's dead. And he's creating everything that's unfolding like I do. I sit here and create every day. I create what you guys are going to experience, all your anomalies.
And it's great because he's making fun of all these memes of everything being toxic. Like he says, even video radiation is going to kill you.
Yeah, video radiation.
And he's really showing how to set yourself in the middle of the vortex. You feeling yourself with all. How you can digest the cheapness to work with it and not be sunk by the corruption and the decadence of the popular culture.
Of success.
To get something out of it. Yes, I mean, he's like, have fun with that. He's making fun of all these, the music, the woo-wop, doo-wop, and the stairs and all. He's having fun with that. It's okay, but
and he keeps it
don't
cheap.
take it serious.
Remember, it's all cheap props. It's like a cheesy production. It's like a high school play. It's amateurish. Other than it's so outrageous, it wouldn't be allowed. It's an amateurish high school play that's not allowed to be performed. It's too obscene. And he's making fun of the whole black culture.
Yeah.
Which is what I used to say years ago, that since that Playboy excerpt I published, McLuhan said that the American blacks would be exterminated because they look too good on color TV. Their profile, their facial structure is way better for charisma than he calls it the chiaroscuro of the white face. So because the blacks have looked charismatic in the 60s, they're going to be exterminated. So Frank knows the blacks are being made. Well, I don't know if he knows this, but the blacks are being made the new gods, and he's going to make fun of them. So I said to Jerry Fialka years ago, one of the agendas of Frank was to make fun of the black the pop culture, which has so much black success in it. From the Supremes. Yeah. Up to Peaches and Herb or whatever their name was. I always remember he was on, in May '79, he was on Dinah Shore, and she interviewed him, and then Peaches and Herb came on. I think that's her name. And a hostility started to happen between them and Frank because they were trying to be successful and glad that Dinah Shore liked him. And Frank's cynicism started to leak out, and they kind of had a bit of an argument. And that's when it hit me. Frank is not fooled by the success that any culture gets. Anybody is falling a victim to the setup. So he's saying the blacks are following the game, and he didn't support the Led Zeppelin guys making a big deal out of B.B. King. He puts that down. And this is a guy who worked for civil rights, in the 50s. But there's something else going on in America, and he's going to make fun of the black culture. Why is that? It's because they make the perfect music. We're hearing it now. They're making the perfect music, and Frank is considering that a drug. As in any environment, he must destroy whatever is popular.
Makes sense, yes. Yes.
I mean, I'm assuming that this is politically incorrect, all this talk, the way he's making fun of blacks talking. And he says that Tim Moore, he did the TV version of Amos and Andy, and he was punished for it. I don't know if that's true. Let's look that up. Is that the name of the guy? And you probably never heard about it, right?
I've never. I remember Amos and Andy when I was really, really, really young, but in Tim Moore, I don't know. Yeah. I've never heard that name.
Yeah, so Amos and Andy. See what the world. There, he's a comedian. He was Kingfish. So you got Thingfish and Kingfish.
Okay.
It says he was born in 1887. He died in 1958. He was an American vaudevillian and comic actor of the first half of the 20th century. He gained his greatest recognition in the starring role of George Kingfish Stevens in the CBS television series Amos and Andy. He proudly stated, quote, "I've made it a point never to tell a joke on stage that I couldn't tell in front of my mother." So he's a real respectable guy. You know what I mean? He didn't want to be rude. Boxing, vaudeville years, Broadway comedian, television stardom. In 1950, Moore was recommended by his old vaudeville friend Flournoy Miller for the role of George Kingfish Stevens, a role which was voiced on radio by white actor Freeman Gosden. They had white people doing it on the radio. He was called out of retirement by CBS to start a new television adaptation of the radio show Amos and Andy. As the radio series had developed in prior years, the scheming but henpecked Kingfish... What's this? Oh, I guess as it had been developed, the plot was the scheming but henpecked Kingfish had become the central focus of most of the plots. In the television version, Moore played the character more broadly, with louder and more forceful delivery and a distinctive Georgia drawl, exaggerated for comic effect. Moore's Kingfish dominated the calmer and soft-spoken Amos and Andy characters. Early in his career, Moore had developed a con man routine he used for many years while in vaudeville. Reworking some aspects of his old act produced the television character Kingfish. Moore, and now this is your idea of the fish fresh out of the water, right? Moore was very popular in the show, and for the first time in his career became a national celebrity, as well as the first African-American to win stardom on television. When leaving a train in Albuquerque to buy some Native American pottery, the proprietor recognized him immediately, saying, You Kingfish. This was the first time it happened in Moore's 52 years in show business. The show aired on primetime TV from June 51 till June 53. So that's during the Korean War. Although quite popular, now look at this. Although quite popular, the series was eventually canceled due to complaints about ethnic stereotyping. Shortly after the television show left the air, there were plans to turn into a vaudeville act in August 1953 with Moore, Williams, and Childress playing the same characters. It is not known if this was ever realized. After the series was canceled, it was shown in syndication until 1966, when increasing condemnation and pressure from the NAACP persuaded the show's owner, CBS, which still owns the copyrights, to withdraw it from further exhibition. It was resurrected in the early days of home videotape through public domain video dealers who had acquired episodes from collectors of used 16mm TV prints, although the copyright was never in the public domain. Illegally produced copies continue to be sold over the Internet. The series itself will not be seen on a regular basis again until independent network Rejoice TV began re-airing episodes in 2012. Many of the episodes revolved around Moore's Kingfish character, supported by Ernestine Wade as his level-headed, emotionally strong wife, Sapphire. and Amanda Randolph as his openly aggressive mother-in-law, without the participation of Amos or Andy. These Kingfish-only episodes were originally produced as a spin-off series, The Adventures of Kingfish, which made its debut on CBS on January 4th, 1955, but lasted only a few episodes. When the Amos and Andy half hours went into syndication, The Adventures of Kingfish shows were added to the syndicated package under the Amos and Andy series title. In 1956, Moore and his fellow castmates, Spencer Williams, Childress, and Randolph, with their choir, tried a tour of personal appearances as, quote, the TV stars of Amos and Andy, unquote. The tour was halted by CBS, who viewed this as infringing on their exclusivity. Moore and fellow cast members Williams, Childress, and Lee were able to perform for one night in 1957 in Windsor, Ontario. That's where Wyndham Lewis was hanging out in the 40s, apparently without legal action being taken against them. Later years, he married his last wife 8 months after Benzonia's death. They had been forming as a comedy team for some time before marrying. This marriage won him considerable publicity thanks to the roast beef scandal of January 58. Moore fired a gunshot in his home because of his mooching in-laws, stepson, stepdaughter, and her husband. when he found that the last of the New Year's roast beef had been eaten by them. Moore related, quote, these freeloaders have eaten everything in my house. My wife protects them, and every time we talk about it, we get into an argument. The argument got a little loud, and the next thing I knew, the big boy, his stepson Hubbard, jumped out of his chair. I ran upstairs and got out my old pistol. I didn't want to hit anybody. When the police arrived at the home, Moore, pistol still in his belt, told them, quote, I'm the old Kingfish, boys. I'm the one you want. I fired that shot. I didn't want to hit anyone, though I could have. Anyway, you should have seen the in-laws scatter when I fired that gun, unquote. The shot Moore fired hit the china cabinet. He was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon, with police calling him the funniest prisoner in police history. Moore was initially ordered held on $1,000 bond. The judge changed his mind and released Moore on his own recognizance. Tim and his wife reconciled, with Vivian's pleading for the charges to be dropped. Moore entered a not guilty plea before the case went to trial on March 24th. He received a $100 fine and a year's probation as his sentence. When the story broke, local television personality and columnist Paul Coates invited Tim Moore to appear on his KTTD television show. Moore explained the situation in 2 guest appearances. Coates was promptly taken to task for Moore's appearance on his show. This guy is so controversial. He's like Zappa. They can't nothing. He goes on a TV show, and the TV host gets in trouble for allowing Moore's appearance on his show by Stanley Robertson, a journalist. He went after Coates, a journalist for the African American newspaper. So what you have is chemical body confusion by the blacks. And they don't recognize this is TV body stuff. And they're getting all mixed up, right? It's entertaining, but they say, no, this is a threat to our image of ourselves, at least in the chemical body. A journalist for the American newspaper, the Los Angeles Sentinel, calling Moore disgraceful and labeling the 2 shows with Moore as television's darkest hour. Was he aware of his pun, darkest? Television's darkest hour. Coates replied to his critic in his January 28, 1958 Los Angeles Times column Coates, the guy who had Tim Moore at Kingfish on his TV show, he yells back at the journalist, the black journalist, and he says he calls Moore a pretty wonderful, sincere man, and saying he strongly resented Robertson's attack on Moore, or even on him. Then it said, because of the roast beef scandal, Moore was once more in demand and even received a testimonial tribute dinner from the Friars Club in Beverly Hills. And he appeared on The Tonight Show with Jack Paar. The publicity also won him an extended performance engagement at the legendary Macombo nightclub. Wow. He died shortly after this. I mean, this is going on in January 29, 58. They probably murdered him. He was getting out of hand. Nobody could understand who was what. Hey, are you the image? Are you Robot Tim Moore, or are you the Moon's dad? January 29, 1958. And he dies a year later, just under a year, December 13th. Died of pulmonary tuberculosis. That's why we don't know anything about him. He's long gone. 4 days after his birthday. There was no money to pay for his hospital care or for his funeral. Moore, having received his final $65 residual payment from Amos and Andy in January 58, a year before. At one time, Moore had made $700 per week. After a large funeral at Mount Sinai Baptist Church, he was buried at Rosedale Cemetery. At the funeral service, 10,000 fans and mourners passed his open coffin. He was given a state funeral. This is pretty good. I wonder if Frank knew this. Is this symbolic of the mixture of bodies? Everything's all mixed up. You know what I mean? The guy's not allowed on TV. He did a disgraceful show making fun of black stereotypes, and then he's given a state funeral. Listen to this. 10,000 fans and mourners passed his open coffin. Attendees included Groucho Marx, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Louis Armstrong, Tony Curtis, Sidney Poitier, Charlie Barnett, Noble Sissel, Erskine Hawkins, Louis Prima, Freeman Gosden, Charles Correll, Spencer Williams, Alvin Childress, Ernestine Wade, Amanda Randolph, Johnny Lee, Sammy Davis Jr., Eddie Rochester Anderson, he'd be the guy on Jack Benny, Andy Razoff, Clarence Muse, Roy Glenn, Monton Moreland, Big Meat Markham, Willie Bryant, Earl Grant. Sammy Davis Jr. later related that Frank Sinatra organized the effort to pay Tim Moore's funeral expenses. Well, wait a minute, that's suspicious. This is the fucking mafia. The racist mafia is celebrating this guy. So that actually cancels all that tribute. It was just done by the mafia who hate blacks, right? I don't the Italians hate blacks or something. So this is organized by Frank Sinatra. They're trying to make the cornier image of blacks the official black image. So I'm suspicious of Frank Sinatra here. Moore's grave. Now look at this. His grave remained unmarked from the time of his burial until 1983. They wouldn't even allow anybody to know where he lived. Fellow comedians Red Fox and George Kirby, remember them, raised funds for a headstone. There's now one marking the graves of Moore and his wife Vivian, who died in 1988, so she lived another 30 years. Let's see. Paying tribute to one of its favorite sons, the Rock Island Public Library held Tim Moore Day on July 16, 2008. Moore's relatives in the area participated by sharing their memories of his life and work. So is that where he grew up? Rock Island, where's that? Yeah, he was born in Rock Island, Illinois, one of 13 children. His father was a night watchman at a brewery. He dropped out of grammar school to work at odd jobs in town and even danced for pennies in the streets with his friend Romeo Washburn. Then he went into vaudeville. So 1898, he was born 1887. So he went into vaudeville when he was 12 or 11 years old. But that's quite a story.
Yes.
Yes, and it's amazing. Frank Zappa goes and takes this archetype of the funniest prisoner ever and makes him a mutant.
Yeah. It's like Frank. See, Frank worked for civil rights, before everybody else in the 50s. He had integrated bands. He got beat up. So he was into civil rights. But by 10 years later, when everybody's being replaced by robotoids, he knows it's all fucked up. And he's got to bring back the politically incorrect fucking Amos and Andy to collect something. And then he has them being the only ones who survive. They have the RNA drops. They survived the nuclear war. It's a metaphor for Frank. Frank is hated. He's a robot. He never sees anybody, but he makes the greatest art, and he's stuck in this limbo.
Yes, that's one thing in popular culture. They use these extreme archetypes like the cowboy, the Indian, and all these. Yes. The housewife, the battle, the cosmic comedian, battle between good and evil.
The Mexican princess, and cliche.
Yes. And he takes these archetypes and makes them even more extreme, and he goes and says the mommy nuns are these type of black comedians. They will use also this type of archetyping, extreme clown making of themselves. They will paint themselves even. They were black, but they will put this shoe cream on themselves to look even darker, and the white lips to make fun of their features, to exaggerate that even more. Like
no, you're talking about what happened. You're not talking about Thingfish now. You're talking about what actually happened in history.
No, because the mummy nuns are this type
the same kind of exaggerated. They got duck lips, which is like the white lips of the 1920s. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, they're supposed to be this type of black comedians. They look
right.
well,
there were white guys who wore blackface.
Yes, but they were
we didn't
also
see black comedians. We were allowed to see them in the 20s.
But they were also black.
Yeah, you're right. I think they were black. I think you're right.
Exaggerating even more.
Right. Since there was segregation, the blacks weren't allowed to mingle, so they had to make them non-black by making them exaggerated black-faced. Is that what was going on? I mean, maybe it was beyond your time, Bert. You know, it's too.
No, I
you
don't
ever
know
hear any talk about
that?
this?
No, I remember seeing it. Yeah, but it's all mixed up, like you said. But
I thought they were white guys who did blackface.
At
first,
you're right.
At first,
it was
black guys. But then it was established as a stereotype. Right, so that the black guys had to pretend they were black. Pretend they were white guys being black. Wow. I think it's, any Zappa fan, they've never probed that Thingfish is about Frank. It's about himself.
Yes.
It's about Bob being a black woman.
Good point. I forgot. It's about me. That's right. I'm a black fucking lesbian. That's right. It's about me. Man, the mammy nun. See, I get so confused. I forgot it was about me. Now, what? See, I would say I was black on the radio, and I had my reasons. But the culture in the Andromean goes forward to support what I did and tell me other aspects I didn't know about myself. Like we're doing right now. I knew it was a black woman, but I didn't think I was Thingfish. But remember, you have this interview with Ike Willis, which Ike does not like it to be too well known. He thought Gail would come after him, where we talk about Frank and Ike finding out that their neighbor was a scientist who actually made the AIDS virus. Right? The guy figured out that he was part of this secret project, Black Ops. He didn't know he was making AIDS virus, but in retrospect, as more knowledge came out in the middle 80s, he realized that's what he had worked on in the lab back on the East Coast or someplace. And he was Frank's neighbor. And so Frank and Ike are planning to do this Broadway musical, but the real story shows up, and then Frank and Ike have to decide how much they're going to tell the truth. And that's all in this interview with Ike.
Yes.
And Ike says, no, Bob, I'm not going to promote it too much. Could get me in trouble. I don't know what he would say now. I'll have to ask him now that Gail's gone. But the very truth of what he and Ike had to figure out. He says in the interview, they had to figure out how much of what they were told they would put in this. They were already planning this project, but then it got screwed up by the truth coming into it. So he had to make it like totally absurd. And then it actually predicts ion, the taking of the drops to protect you. Beautiful. Beautiful complexity.
Wow.
Right? Roxy, you still here?
Yes. The way, yes, I was thinking how that was a retrieval of the clowns in Italy. There was this Pierrot figure that was, they would paint themselves white, extreme white, and they would also exaggerate their features, the nose and the red lips.
Right. So he's got this absurd Thingfish image. They're wearing napkins. big hands, ridiculous physical makeup. I wonder where that is, the part where it describes Thingfish. Is it right at the beginning? And it begins with Roxy's mother. The opening section is Aurora and the Duke of York.
The music lesson, the cello lesson by Frank